And I am just so excited. I'm really excited because it has been a journey for me. Wow, am I getting emotional? Hey guys, oh my gosh, I am so excited. I don't even know where to start. Okay, let me breathe. First of all, let me introduce myself. Hey guys, my name is Sonja of SonjaW Coaching, and again, I am super excited. I think I'm excited every single time that I come on here because I love talking to you guys, but I am extra excited today because I'm letting you guys know about a little secret of mine. Now, my email list has known about this for a while now, but since we're getting so close to the launch date, I thought I would share with you. I am launching a devotional. I know, it's crazy. So I have been working on this for a really long time, and I am super excited because I finally get to say something about it to you guys and really just talk about how I got to this place. Now, what's gonna happen, and I'm switching up a little bit because typically I just kind of come on here and give you guys, not just, but I come on here and give you guys a little snippet or tip or idea about living intentionally, right? Well, this month or the next 4 weeks, I'm gonna do something a teensy little bit different, right? All of these things are all key for intentional living, but I'm gonna give you a treat along with it. I am going to give you one of my favorite devotionals, devotionals each week, and we're going to talk about how that kind of comes together with intentional living. But first, let me introduce myself. Hey guys, my name is Sonja of SonjaW Coaching, where we help overwhelmed, multi-passionate women learn how to acknowledge, live, execute, and win their dreams. See, I'm like tumbling over my words because I'm so excited. But I am so passionate, and we are so passionate about making sure that you make sure that your dreams meet reality with my coaching. Okay? So, let's get into this. Like I said before, I am launching a devotional, and it's called Planted. And it kind of was born through my study of trees. I started to notice in the Bible that God talks a lot about trees, and he compares man to trees. And I started seeing these patterns and was like, this is strange. Okay, there's some characteristics to a person who is like a tree, and there's some characteristics to flourishing at life if you're this type of tree. And it started with Jeremiah 17:7-8. And let me see, did I write it down? Of course I didn't write it down. But it's so cool because it talks about, and if you go before verse 7, it talks about how a man who is like a shrub is like just gonna fall apart, not gonna live, not gonna flourish, all that kind of stuff. And a person who is like a shrub is someone who does not rest in God's presence, does not follow his word, all that kind of stuff, right? But then in 7 and 8, he starts to talk about how a person who is like a tree planted by his river, presence of God, and all of this good stuff. They have leaves forever. They do all of these things. Like, they flourish at life. So it made me start to think about, okay, well, what does that have to do with me as a person who has a bunch of different things that I love to do? What does this have to do with the people that I coach? How can this help? And I started to look at these different verses and kind of pull together different blogs that I've written and different things that I've written in my own journals with different about different Bible verses and stuff like that. And I wanted to bring it all together in this devotional for you and for me, because let me tell you, my own devotional has been kicking my own tail, but in a good way. So I'm just going to break down what I learned and how I came up with the concept here. But in the next 3 weeks, I am going to give you my favorite devotionals from each section of the devotional journey. Okay, so let me break down all the different things, right? So I realized and I noticed in all of these verses, like I saw I saw it in Jeremiah 17, I saw it in Psalm 1, I saw it in Ezekiel 47, and I saw it in Psalm 92, that God always was talking about how if you are a tree that does X, you will flourish, right? And there's plenty other places where God talks about trees, but these were kind of like the main things that kind of jumped out at me. And the 3 areas that I saw in those verses, in all of those different verses, is that a person who was planted in his presence, in God's presence, a person that is planted in God's promises, his word, and a person who is planted in God's purpose for them will flourish. They will prosper in everything that they do. They will be able to provide something that's going to heal others. And I was like, you know what? Those are the 3 things that we need. We need to be planted in his presence, his promise, and his purposes to make sure that we are living our lives intentionally and doing the good work that God has already called us to do. So I'm going to break down those 3 areas and how I think we can be planted in those areas. Okay, so let's get to it. And I guess how I structured this 30-day devotional is by those sections. So they're broken up into 10-day sections where we focus on being planted in his presence, different aspects of that, being planted in his promises, different aspects of that, and then being planted in his purpose for us. And I am just so excited. I'm really excited because it has been a journey for me. Wow, am I getting emotional? It's been a journey for me. A journey through fear, a journey through perseverance, a journey through understanding and growing in confidence that God has placed different things inside of me that I need to get out and help people with, right? And it's kind of like the start of something grand. And I guess that's why I'm getting excited, because I can tell you, like, I've been telling like close family and close friends about it, and they're over the moon for me, and I'm just like, But now that we're getting so close to it, I'm like getting really, really giddy, because it's really kind of just a testament to myself, but then also I am excited because of what it's going to do for everyone who gets a chance to read it. So let me get to it. All right. So like I said, I truly believe that each person needs to be planted in these 3 areas to be able to truly flourish. Okay. And the devotional helps you through each one of those areas. The first one is being planted in his presence. And I'm going to read 2 verses. Psalm 92:13. It says, planted in the house of the Lord, his presence, they shall flourish in the courts of our God. And then Ezekiel 47:12. Now this was kind of weird, but we'll talk about it. It says, and on the banks on both sides of the river, there will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, nor their fruit fail, but they will bear fresh fruit every month, because the water from them flows from the sanctuary. Their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing. There's so much packed in that little verse. I'll talk about it. The last verse, and then the last thing that I want to remind people of is that Jeremiah 3:33 says that if we call to him, he will show us secret things. And I think it's in his presence, when we take time to call to God, when we take time to rest in his presence, then we're going to hear the secret things that he has for us. We're going to hear why we're built the way we're built. We're going to hear why we care about the things that we care about. And he's going to show us what to do next. We'll be able to truly hear him, right? So let me break down a little bit of those verses that I gave you. I talked about Ezekiel 47 because Ezekiel was kind of a weird prophet, I guess. If you ever read it, it's a lot of stuff in that in that book. But chapter 47 kind of jumped out at me for many reasons, and of course because of the verses about trees in there. But in that chapter, Ezekiel is like going on a journey with like an angel, and this angel is walking him through the sanctuary. Then he walks out of the sanctuary and he sees this water flowing from under the sanctuary, and the angel talks about how that is flowing from the presence of God. So the river is kind of like a metaphor for the presence of God. And then he talks about how these trees are growing up along the sides of the that river, and they talk about the plants and all and the animals that are living in and around that water. And it talks about, how all of those things are flourishing. But when it comes to the trees, they talk about how that those trees are bearing fruit every single month. Imagine that. Every single month, rain, snow, sleet, whatever, every single month they're bearing fruit. And that fruit that they bear is for healing, for people to heal. Can you imagine? So if we talk about how people are trees, and that these trees that are close to the presence of God are always bearing fruit, and fruit that heals others, what does that mean for us? When we are in the presence of God, we should be bearing fruit. We should be bearing fruit that heals people. And that's why it's so important to be planted in his presence. When we're planted in his presence, we get an opportunity to transform lives, to show people that there's a better way to live. And that's the key about it all, that we are able, when we're in his presence, that we can find the peace that we're looking for. We can find the hope that we're looking for. And we can find this and then give it to others. And that's the key and the beautiful thing about it. I love everything in this, and I was just thinking about it, like his presence. When we think about like a tree. Have you ever like gone hiking and you see the water? You hike by a stream of water and you see the trees. They're beautiful and green, and you see the animals living, and they seem to be flourishing in that environment. We flourish in the presence of God. And it's so important that, and particularly people who have a ton of things that they love to do, or maybe they just do a lot. Now, we talk about doing too much as well in some of these other videos that I got, so go ahead and check those out. But that's not what we're here for. When we take a moment to be in God's presence, when we're planted, grounded in his presence, the stress, the anxiety, the things that surround us, that cause us to go crazy, can calm down. His presence brings hope. His presence brings peace. I love with Philippians 4. Philippians 4? Did I write it down? I don't know. I think I talk about it later. But Philippians 4, we're going to talk about it now, then we'll talk about it again if I talk about it later. But Philippians 4 talks about how when we are in his presence, when we are not anxious for anything, but we pray, when we spend time in his presence, then the peace that surpasses all understanding overcomes us. We're able in his presence to shed all of that stress, to shred all of the things that we strive to do, because we are confident and in peace in his presence. So that's the first section. The second place to be planted is his promises. And I love Psalm 1:3, where it says, but his delight and desire, and this is in the amplified version, but his delight and desire are in the law of the Lord, and on his law, the precepts, the instructions, the teachings of God, he habitually meditates, ponders, and studies by day and by night. And he shall be like a tree firmly planted and tended by the streams of water. There goes the streams of water again, ready to bring forth its fruit in its season. Its leaf also shall not fade or wither, and everything he does shall prosper and come to maturity. So that second section is all about his promises, what the promises of God can do, and what happens when we spend time in his word and learn his promises. God truly does promise us a lot of stuff. But how in the world do we get planted in it if we don't know it? It's so important that we know his promises, and then we sit in his promises, and then we grow in his promises. And how we do that is by reading his word. I love it. It talks about how he's going to keep us safe, how nothing will come near our dwelling. He says that if we dwell in his presence and we dwell in him, that we are covered by his wings. It says that that he's enthralled with who we are, that he made us wonderfully and beautifully, that he has all of these good things for us. But how do we know it if we don't know his word? He says that he allows us to make wealth, right? He allows us. He says that he would never leave us forsaken, nor his children begging for bread. Like this, these are the promises of God. And these are only a little bit that I can remember off the top of my head. The whole Bible has so many promises that God has given to us. And it's so important that we spend time in his promises. And this is where I talk about Philippians 4. I was like, I know I talk about it somewhere else in this in this video. But Philippians 4, 6 and 7 says to not be anxious about anything, but pray. And when we do, that peace that surpasses, we'll get that peace that surpasses all understanding. So truly, are you missing peace? Are you missing that rest that surpasses all understanding? It may be because one, you're not in his presence, because that was the first section. But then two, is that you don't even know that that promise is available to you. And that's why it's so important to be planted in his promises, planted in his word, okay? And then the third thing is that we are planted in his purpose. Now, I talk about this in the third section of the book, and I lay out what it actually means, right? Like I talk about how purpose is not found. It's revealed. And then also you'll learn that purpose is not really, I was made to be a doctor. That is an action, that is something that God wants you to do, but the purpose is to glorify God. So if you glorify God by being the best doctor ever, you are fulfilling purpose. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. I wasn't even going to talk about that there, but we talk about it in the devotional. But let me read the verse. It says Psalm 1:3, and this is 1:3b-ish. I'm kind of like pulling from sections of that verse. It says, he is like a tree that yields fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. It does not wither in it, and in all things he prospers. My tongue. And then Ephesians 2:10 says that we are planted to produce, that we are planted, when we're planted, we produce. So let me read this again. It says, for Ephesians 2:10 says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. If we are planted in his purpose, then it's going to be good. And it's to do good works, okay? So, and God created us for good works. And that's why it's okay to be a multi-passionate person. Because when we understand what we value, when we understand the things that we are called to do, then we can, I was about to say balance. I don't like balance. I don't actually believe in balance. That's a whole other thing. Maybe I'll talk about that at some point too. But when we when we understand what we value, when we understand our purpose, and when we are planted in God's purposes, in his presence and his promises, it's easier to be intentional about what we do, and we'll be able to do several things well. Now, there are limits to what we can do overall, but when we are based in our values, based in our life principles, I talk about that in other videos, then we are truly able to live out the purpose that God has for us. We were made for good works. We were made to do good things here in the earth for God's good purposes for us and for others. And when we are planted in his purpose to glorify him, then we're able to see our life flourish. So I am super excited because this again has been a labor of love, and I just don't even like have words. Like I'm just like, it's happening. And I hope that this was really, really helpful for you. In the next 3 weeks, I am going to pull one of my favorite devotionals from each section of the 30-day journey. And I'll talk about it a little bit more, expound upon it. And we're just going to have a good old time in the month of June coming up to the launch of the book. So if you want more information and you want it before it gets to YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to my email list. And also subscribe to this channel if you really like this stuff. Like, I know you've been watching a couple of my videos. You're like, she's all right. Well, do me a favor. Go ahead and subscribe so you can get these videos every single Thursday. All right? See you guys next week.